In academia, private sector, government, and media, Professor Juliette Kayyem is an international leader in crisis management and homeland security. Professor Kayyem serves as faculty chair of Homeland Security and Security and Global Health Projects at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Previously, she served as President Obama's Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security and Governor Deval Patrick's Homeland Security Advisor. As an on-air CNN senior national security analyst, Pulitzer Prize finalist, and contributing writer for The Atlantic and Boston's local NPR station WGBH, Kayyem consults for governors, mayors, public and private institutions on crisis management. She's a senior advisor to NEO, a global consulting firm, and founded her own consulting firm to support the preparedness needs of companies, from Fortune 500s to startups. She was named Inc. magazine's top 100 female founders in 2019 and received the Lifetime Achievement Pinnacle Award from the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce in 2023. Juliette is the author or editor of 6 books, including her most recent, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters, which describes in a New York profile of her as an engagingly urgent blueprint for rethinking our approach to disaster preparedness and response. Juliette lives in Cambridge with her husband, Judge David Barron, and their 3 children. Please help me welcome Juliette.
Okay, 2 things before I start. One is thank you for taking the 10-year-old headshot. I'm very grateful about that. And then I am a client of 40 Weeks. Where'd you just go? My office is across the street at the Kennedy School. But the problem is whenever I buy something, I'm running to like 4 male students. And anyway, I love your and I love your stuff. So. And I was one of those people who said, I've had this bra for 20 years. Anyway, oh wait, where is my? Okay, is that better? Okay, good. I mean, okay. Oh, yay. Okay, hi, here we go. We're gonna start. I'm also gonna start my talk because I have a tendency to talk too much, and I want to hear from all of you because I figure many of you are interested in disasters right now. Why wouldn't you be? You are alive. And okay, so what I want to do, because I thought about this, is I want to just take you a little bit through my world of disaster management, where we are in the thinking, to maybe be a little bit wonky, and how I got here, and then talk about a few events, and then I can answer lots of questions about everything going on in the world and what I worry about, and even my more present work. Well, all of you know my politics, but Trump became president, and I knew I wasn't going to DC, so I now have a very big role in sports, which is so bizarre, but I leave tomorrow for the Formula One race in Las Vegas because I'm their security consultant. And I just figure, why not? Like, you know, you only live once and don't be judgy. Okay. Totally corrupt. Oh my God, it's a totally weirdest group of people in the world, but still better than terrorists. Okay, so I'm going to start with those of you who have read my book or maybe have heard me speak again. I like to start in Cambridge in the fun month of May of 2020, if any of you will remember. I do have 3 kids. They were all home. I have a daughter who lives on the 3rd floor, or whose room was on the 3rd floor, and the boys are on the 2nd floor. This is their 2nd floor bathroom. I show you a picture of their bathroom because during COVID, where I professionally, we're all home, we're all stressed out, but professionally, if you're in my field, it was, you know, I'm not going to compare myself to doctors, but it was like the doctors, right? Like it's like you're getting pounded on work. As mayors and governors and everyone are just like seeking advice on sort of how do they steer their constituencies through this horror of COVID. The boys, as boys do, decided not to tell me when their fan broke on the 2nd floor of their bathroom. And so 2 weeks later, the entire ceiling comes off. I live in Cambridge, those of you very much like here. You know, my house was built in the 1840s, a single family house. And I call it lovely and cranky. It's like me, lovely and cranky. It is old and and it was one of those houses that were, that, had been like 18 different things over its lifetime. Like it was a single family house and a two-story, then two-family house. At one stage it was a restaurant, another stage it was like a dorm area for Radcliffe, because we don't live so far from the university. When we bought it, it was a single family house, and we've been told that on the third floor, in the area above where the boys' bathroom is, there was a crawl space behind a closet. Now, most people, you don't break open the closet unless you're gonna redo the house. So we just thought behind the closet wall on the third floor was a crawl space that was, above the boys' bathroom. So yes, this falls down, and I get a ladder and stick my head in, and because I think this is slightly bigger than a crawl space. I don't want to pretend like there's like another room in my house. We have slanted ceilings, so the way I describe it is like it was basically big enough for a very narrow bed and a desk, and that is exactly what happened. So we found one picture in the entire honestly, it's this big, which is this picture of this man who we later learned was Charles McHugh, and then he says something, if you can read close, he says Annie something something, and then it sort of looks like a Charles, whatever. So Twitter used to be helpful, not so helpful anymore, and I put it on Twitter, and I said, I can't even date this picture, but this is kind of weird, right? So I put it on Twitter, and lots of very helpful people were, dating this probably to the early 20th century based on the coloring and whatever, and then starting to decipher this based on where I lived. I realized that was sort of a mistake. I didn't put my address on, but this will definitely lead to the address. I go to bed that night, oh, the McHughes, it must have been the McHughes who lived here from 1917 to 1919, because there was an Annie McHugh. And they're so lovely, and isn't that great? And I go to bed and think, okay, great, that's interesting. I of course lock the bathroom door. My husband's like, you deal with terror. We're locking that door until we can close this thing up. The next morning we wake up to something a little bit more interesting, which obviously was not like a eureka moment for me in terms of my work. It just sort of reflected what I had been thinking about, having spent 20 plus years in counterterrorism and homeland security. So I started off in counterterrorism and then would get more into defense and preparedness. And that is that the McHughes had a daughter named Letitia who lived at 30 Lee Street from 1917 to 1919. And then Letitia, what we learned was she had passed away in the house, in the room on the third floor, which was what's known as an infirmary room that women would give birth there. They didn't have hospital systems like us. People who were sick would go isolate there, and she went up there and she passed away. She did not survive, and the funeral, the funeral was in the home, and the McHughes boarded it up and moved out in 1919. That is weird. And people said to me, did you move out? I was like, do you know about real estate? I got a single family house, we're never moving. Well, the more sort of interesting thing is, of course, on her birth certificate, which a follower found, it turned out she died in the third wave of the Spanish flu, the Spanish pandemic in 1919. And I thought, that's karma. That's weird. My daughter was 19 at the time. She was 19 when she passed away. And I thought about that connectivity of me to Annie McHugh, same house, trying to protect our families from this horrible thing. I was the lucky one. Annie was not and lost her daughter. Annie would live into the 1950s. But the Spanish flu passed through New England pretty horribly in its third wave, and lots of people passed away. We don't talk about it as much anymore. And I thought about that through line, which basically then led to my work in the Devil Never Sleeps. So basically what my work is, and just because it's your work too, which is basically that our disaster management framework is built on a false premise that disasters are random and rare. So I talk really loud, so I'm gonna step away. But you're gonna get all the wonky terms, but you'll hear people like me say left of boom, which is prevention, protection, like, okay, the bad thing, we're gonna try to stop the bad thing from happening, and we want that to work. It's not gonna always work, right? That's your intel people, maybe, the disruption of terrorist groups. Honestly, it's a lock on the cockpit door, which ends up being really good to stop people from getting into a cockpit. Then you have the boom, and I'm pretty agnostic about this, and the book title is The Devil. It's the boom. I'm agnostic about what kind of threat we're gonna face. We're just gonna have disruptions throughout our lives, and they could be personal disruptions or also bigger societal ones. And so while I started in counterterrorism, I do a lot on lots of different areas. And then ride and boom is your response and your recovery, right? So this is how the system was built. It was, oh my gosh, so sad, there's a disaster, it's random and rare, let's try to stop it from happening, or if it happens, we'll try to respond and then act like we're not here, right? Which is where obviously we are right now, which is like the investments that you're gonna make in being better prepared for and respond to your crisis, the stronger you'll be for when the next one comes. You just have to assume that disasters are now standard operating procedure. So those of you who watch me on TV or hear me, I'm on live at the Boston Public Library. So if you want to go early, I actually have a live show tomorrow at 12, at noon, that you're basically trying to stop the floor from collapsing, right? That you just are gonna assume that it comes. And the role is to anticipate the bad thing, be ready for it, rather than sit there and go, oh, I can't believe this is happening. I didn't finish my sentence, but those of you who watch me or listen, I can't believe this is happening, right? I don't find it helpful as a public commentator in my field. Like, I have every capacity to freak you all out, and I just don't view that as responsible. Or as my husband said, just tell me when I need the gas mask. Okay, I'll tell you when you need the gas mask. But we have a deal there. So this is where the work is heading, and we're trying to figure out ways in disaster management without the help in many ways of FEMA now, what this means. And you can think about this in all the ways that you're dealing with this, and you don't know that you're dealing with it, but you are. Just think about your insurance and the way that insurance is adapting or to trying to push you to better behavior. Where do you live? If you have a beach house, how are you rebuilding if it gets damaged? And thinking about ways in which we're anticipating the next harm, rather than having systems that go, I'm so sorry you lost your home, here's money, why don't you build right back here? Not a good idea. Like, and this is where I go off on Plum Island, but maybe people have houses there. So I'm gonna be quiet. But like Plum Island, every year, some guy, like 5 years in a row, the boss goes like, for the 5th year, he lost his entire home. I'm like, why are we doing this again? It's like, shock of all shocks. Okay, so how should you think about crisis in your life? Because I didn't want to make this, if the McHughes weren't personal enough, I wanted you to just think about what I do in crisis management and then how that can help you. So like, think about like my big event this weekend is a Formula One race. Okay, so I think about, I can focus on all the bad things that could happen. I don't. I focus on the boom. So there's going to be some disruption and the challenges that we'll have in responding to the boom, because it could happen to a driver, and that's a different governance system. It could happen within the gates, right? And those of you who've seen a Formula One race, and Las Vegas in particular, it's on the strip, so that's why it's a big deal event. Or it could happen outside of the tickets, but it impacts what's inside the tickets. You think of all these different layers. This is what I do. I think through not, oh, this person could do that. It's like, there's going to be a disruption. What do I wish I had in place? So this is my airplane analogy, my airport analogy. This is my life. If you're ever thinking, if you leave here with nothing else, it is that you will, like, every time you're thinking of something, you'll be like, I need to extend the runway. Okay, I'm going to tell you about plane crashes on runways. The vast majority of plane crashes on runways occur because the pilot runs out of runway. Right? So this is a success. Remember, my world is not good, right? I'm not at good, right? I am at less bad, right? So like, I'm already, this is like not good in any fear event thing, but that's really less bad. I like that picture, right? Okay, so if you think about a crisis is defined as, we call everything a crisis in this country, and it's not all a crisis. A crisis is defined as a disruption to the institution, your family, your work, whatever, to your core capabilities, that comes at an unanticipated time, so you're not like sure exactly when it would come. And then this is the key point, where your ability to respond is limited in time. You're right, and so I just say the runway's short. So if you know that now, like, well, you know that now, right? So you only have two options. I say my job is easy. The problem is no one wants to eyes wide open. Easy, not in that sense, but easy in the sense. I only have two options when I know the crash landing is happening. Because remember, I'm right at boom. I am assuming the bad thing is going to happen. I don't know what it is. Is I either get ready for the crash landing, right? So you've got, this is your preparedness apparatus. They're ready. The airplane's coming and crash landing. Or you give them a lot of runway. That's your life. Either get ready for the bad thing or buy yourself time. Because that's the thing, you know, AI, so that's the thing that makes me nervous about AI. Not that AI is going to be like robots. It's just like it kind of is taking away our ability to manage time in a meaningful way. So that's what we do. That's what people like me do, is we set up structures that anticipate the crash landing and then extend the runway. So I was talking to someone earlier, and then, you know, I'm just relating the politics. You guys can ask me in the Q&A, but just sort of saying, like, do you think this Epstein thing is like gonna bring him, everyone knows who him is, right? Him down, you know? And I just don't think about it that way. It's just a question of like, if you're worried about our democracy, does the distraction and the weakness that may accrue to Donald Trump, does that give us more time to buttress our democracy? That's where I worry more. The Epstein stuff is sort of background noise to me. And for my politics, yeah, it does. It buys more time, because I want to buttress the systems that are going to protect our democracy in the years to come. So I could do this for almost anything, right? So I'm just like, you know, I do the Olympics. So I was in Paris. I'm going to Milan. So I'm thinking, what's my short runway? How do I extend it? Well, I'm mostly worried about avalanches, right? I'm worried about things like that. I'm not worried less about terrorism and an event like that. But you know, you think about airports or wherever you may be. So if you're thinking about on your personal level, this is what I tell mothers and sisters and aunts and whoever else is, like, it's just really pointless. My job is to try to give you agency. And it's just really pointless to sort of sit around and be like, can you believe this is happening? You get to do that. I do that, trust me. I do it at home. But the more important thing is, are you using that agency? We still have agency to get ready for the thing that you worry about the most. So like the basic things are pretty obvious. No one tells you that. So like people will say to me, well, what does it mean to be ready? Do I have to be a prepper? You don't have to be a prepper. 1 gallon of water per day for 3 days. We basically say 72 on you. So go to Target, if you have a family of 5, that's 15 gallons of water, I'm done. Right? No one ever makes it easy. We all make it hard. People like me, they want to freak you out, or they want, you know. So you sort of think about, but you think about communications if your kids aren't here anymore. Or think about if your parents are in another state. Just what are the 2 or 3 things that if like there was a disruption, I really wish I had done that or had known that. I have when my kids were younger, we travel a lot. I travel a lot for work. I tried to take them when we could, when they were out of school. And I turned them at one stage, and we're in a foreign country. I think we were in Morocco, which is like really bad parenting considering the answer to their question. I was like, do you know where we're staying? And they're like, the hotel. It's like, you know, I mean, like basic things, like if I got separated from a kid, I would wish they knew the name of the hotel, for sure, right? So I mean, you can make it very, very manageable. It's like, yeah, the hotel is not an answer. Okay, so this is just where, I'm gonna just quickly go through these because, how am I on time? Oh, I'm good, okay. Which is sort of like, you know, so where we need to go in disasters, in particular climate disasters, but any sort of large scale disasters, is really to think less about risk. So anyone who's been in insurance knows this. This is low probability, high probability, low consequence, high consequence. We give names for all of it, but like your low consequence, high probability event,
and not for the person in the car, but it's generally car accidents. We have gazillions of cars on the street at any time. A minimal number of them are in accidents. We're building cars better. You know, they're gonna prevent you from getting into accidents. So you're not gonna like worry about this that much. This is mine. I apologize if anyone has lost anyone this day, but the young people in the room, you know this. You know, you're all into Instagram and everything. And we do have about a couple dozen selfie stick deaths a year, which is like people forgetting that, yeah, that picture's great over the Grand Canyon. Right, exactly. We have a couple dozen. Now, let me tell you, I feel really bad about it, but it's a low consequence, low probability event. I'm not gonna worry. I mean, I'll put a sign, like if I'm designing it, right, you put a sign up in front of the Grand Canyon, don't do your Instagram picture on the other side of the railing, but, but this is what we worry about more now, which is sort of stop worrying about what the risks are. Like stop, I mean, one can worry about it, one can prepare for it, but like the big thing is your high consequence events, right? The disruptive events that are gonna sort of change either your institution, are you BP oil and you have a rig explosion? Are you NASA and you have the shuttle go off? I mean, you think about what are those big disruptions that you prepare for? So I have a concept that's called this is where the book and the New Yorker piece that was cited is sort of like this idea of learning to fail safer, right? So I don't say learning, like and many of you will know the terms fail safe, right? It's a system that makes sure that something doesn't collapse. I don't do safe, right? I do safer, right? So Boston Marathon planning, I was the state's Homeland Security advisor before the bombing, but was with CNN then. And the next year they say, is the Boston Marathon safe? I was like, it's not 26.2 miles open street, it's 52.4. And like the answer is no, right? We don't do safe, we do safer. And so the book and my work, and we could talk about specifics, is just sort of, I can make this easy. It's sort of 8 different lessons for it, including like assume the boom. It's just assume the crash landing, because ignoring it won't get you into the preparedness world. And things like, what's the word, is just a shorthand for, do you have awareness of what's going on around you? Okay, so I'm gonna end with, so that's great to do and great to plan and prepare for. But one of the phenomena that we are experiencing in my world is, and I'm sure many of you with children will know this, which is the safer you make things, the riskier people become. So Bill Booth was one of the most famous skydivers. He's the most famous skydiver if you're in that world. Everyone knows Bill Booth. And Bill Booth was responsible for designing these more safer parachutes, right? These ones that have like the double lock and redundant systems and all that stuff that will go off if you get too close to the ground. I mean, my goal in life, I think I said this in the article, like I don't want my last words to be, I'm so stupid, so I do not jump but if you do, here, you should know this, which is, so Bill Booth, starts designing these new parachutes, but he notices, or at least in the data, that fatalities per jump were not going down. Why would that be? Like that's weird. Because it was basically people were offsetting the sense of protection that they were getting by acting riskier. So on the one hand, so think about this. So why do football players who have helmets suffer from greater concussions than rugby players who do not? It's because having the helmet is giving them the phenomena that they're safe and they're doing stuff that no one should do with their head, right? Rugby players, there's a community of rugby players who are saying, we're all going to protect our heads. You're not going to butt someone purposefully in the head. So that's sort of thinking about how do I get ready, but also warning against the things that make us riskier because we think that we are safer. Okay, so 5 takeaways for your planning. This is for corporate, but many of you are in corporate, but this is what I do with companies or my students or even audiences like this, where I'm thinking like, okay, I need to give you some takeaways, right? Okay, so one is accept, which is you're all, whatever your role is, you're gonna be on a personal or professional level responsible for something. If you're not now, you will be eventually in your career. So instead of thinking that you could keep all bad things at bay, get ready for your crash landing, right? Whatever that's gonna look like, communication, systems of people to adapt. So this is create unity of effort. This is more applying to corporations, which is, we tend to build things around the harm, right? We've got the terrorism people and the cybersecurity people and the doctor and my public health people and the climate people. Like, they're all the same, right? They're all just trying to get ready for some particular harm. So we talk a lot about unity of effort, which is stop worrying about the risk. You're going to want your responses to be the same. The manage is you want to have a sense of what it is that's happening in real time, whether you set it up as a mother in terms of what where your family is, or what we call the situational awareness. So I live by, I'm in the news in the sense of I have to respond quickly, because I tend to, I do breaking news, so I tend to do that pretty good. And so I always ask myself the 3 questions. My husband's Jewish, and he said, you got it close. So I was like, I'm close, which is what, so what, now what? Do I have that there? Yes, sort of, not exactly. So, oh yeah, at the top, I put it at the top because everyone loved it. What, so what, now what? What is happening? So what does it matter to me, right? Like, are my equities implicated? I think about this all the time about, like, I can be outraged about a lot of things. In my world, too much focus on immigration and DHS I worry about because I worry about the harms that we're not addressing. But I'm not going to riff about everything, right? Like, so I would love to talk to you about, Harry and Meghan. I've got strong opinions about that, but then I don't, because it sort of means so how does that impact my equities? And then now what's the plan? Right, so you're trying to figure out how am I thinking about the what, so what, now what? People ask me, how do I, absorb like all the news and everything just because, about immigration, about climate, about whatever. And as I do a sort of table setting is that the right way to put it? Like a scene setting every morning, which is I actually sort of say that to myself, right? Like what, so what, now what? Because I can't be, like, I'm a pretty happy person. I've got a full life. Like, I don't want to be in a place where, I'm angry or responding or fearful of things that are not in the what, so what, now what camp. Pressure test is just basically make sure that your systems are defensible, and then learn, which is what we call the sort of fallacy of the near misses. Many of us, you go, ooh, that was lucky, right? That might also be telling you that you were close, and so check your system of preparedness. But so that's sort of where disaster management is right now in terms of, it's not fatalistic, it's not a crisis management, it is in a world that you have your infinity loop, right? And where the crash landing is more likely to come than not. How do you get ready for it, right? And how do we want to change rules and laws and insurance and zoning and all the things that we want to do, in particular for climate, or how do we buy ourselves more time? And those are your options, but they can make things less bad, right? And that's my standard. So I want to end with the book title. It's not 40 Winks, nor is it lingerie, but A Broken Dream. And so the devil never sleeps is obviously like, we need to think about the consistency of these disruptions in the kind of world we live in now. But it's a really optimistic, once you open the book, which is, so Joplin was, I'll tell you where I got from. Joplin, Missouri is a small town, still a town, in one of the reddest states in the country. And I work, I have strong opinions, but I work across, and all lives are worthy, and one works with people with different backgrounds. I was just in Oklahoma. They're doing really interesting things on climate. Just don't call it climate change. Okay, I won't call it climate change, but they're getting ready for tornadoes in a way that I sort of wish other places would, right? So if you just can take some of that pressure off. So Joplin, Missouri lost 117 people in 32 seconds because tornadoes are what we call rhymes with which. They are horrible. because if you are not, I mean, they form very, very quickly. The tornado went down 19th Street, so linear, so powerful that if you were on 20th or 18th Street, you were fine. You just put if you were on 19th Street, and so lots of people died. And I went to Joplin after the tornado, and then, as is often the case in jobs or just the weird aspect of a job like mine, is you're invited like a year later, like the anniversary, and there's celebrations or mornings, but they were also, they're sort of about resiliency. So I went back to Joplin, and its recovery, the community side of its recovery is being led by a woman named Jane Cage. Jane I'm still friends with her, absolutely devout, very conservative, faith-based, answers, God is often her answer. And she, but she was leading this with like an energy and a vigor and everything about her community in terms of support and engaging everyone. It was just an amazing thing to see how this community came together and was thinking about how Joplin could be built better, essentially. A year after this horror, small community, everyone lost someone. And I said, how are you so optimistic, right? And because some people can be fatalistic about their faith, right? About this happens, right? And she was not like, she said, God gave me agency. And that was such a nice way to think about it, right? That the human, what separates us is our capacity to assert agency. And she said, and I live in Missouri, and it was Tornado Alley. There's going to be more tornadoes. And then she said, there are going to be more tornadoes. The devil never sleeps here, but he only wins if we don't do better next time. And I thought, that's exactly right. As I thought about my connection to Annie McHugh, right? Is that can we do better or less bad as we go forward? And that makes me optimistic, honestly. So I'll end with that with lots of questions, and happy to take the questions. Yes, happy.
So, I am not a prepper, but
Yeah.
I recently read an article about solar flares.
Yeah.
And that caused me a lot of pause, even to the extent where I called my doctor and I was like, should I get like a year's back thing in my prescription?
Oh, no. I mean, if you felt like you needed to, I'm not sure you'd want to live, right? Think about that. Do you really want to be so isolated from anything for a year? That's like the thing, like the prepper is like, yeah, I could live in my bunker for a year. I was being sarcastic there, but it's like not the world. So what I say about prescriptions,
But solar flares, like they talk about it could take out the complete electric.
Yeah, but we have redundancies and what they're
Okay.
not telling you. They're not telling you that. So let me tell you, so we have disruptions. We had one recently, as many of you know, who were trying to get online and stuff. When was that? A couple of weeks ago, or like 2 weeks ago. Today too. Yeah, first of all, we're experiencing them all the time, and we regroup, right? Because there are redundancies. We have systems of building things that we call it that try to limit the cascading losses, right? So it's much rarer than you would think, given how connected we are, that one system goes down and all systems are impacted, even if it's solar. And we have redundancies, and we're ready for them. There might be disruptions. It's very rare that those disruptions would be a year disruptions, right? So that you would. So think about it this way: so I grew up in the 70s, 80s, right? So there were massive. I grew up in LA, but in New York, I remember massive blackouts across the city. Right? Remember, for days, the whole city. When was the last time you think of what? And when was the last time the whole city went out? For the last 3 years. Why not? Because the system we've learned, and the system is now built that you wouldn't have what's called a single point of failure. Right? So we don't build these systems as a single point of failure. Now there could be one, as anyone who watches TV, someone could make a mistake, and
what's the one that I'm watching, the nuclear one?
Chernobyl.
Yes, House of Dynamite. Yeah, I'm watching House of Dynamite, like, you know, but even that, lots of experts are saying that's not helpful because there'd be, like, you don't go from, we don't know what's in the sky to nuclear Armageddon, like because the president, you know, can't make up, because the president's wife's in Africa. Like, it's like, it doesn't work that way, one hopes. So that's my thing. So can I just talk to you about medicine though? And glasses and diapers for the younger women. It was like, what are those things that you would really need that would be, not that the world won't have them, but that would just be an inconvenience for some period of time to get, and then get 3 or 4 of them. So reading glasses, so you have the basic. For food and water, 72 on you, we call it 72 on you, that tends to be about right. Like these, you know, the next snowstorm, anyone who's moved to Boston, like we go crazy. Like the snow never happens. And like there's like people raiding for like 20 days. When was the last time you were inside for longer than like 6 hours, right? Like, these systems on them. So that's what I do, and like any medications, diapers, baby formula. So like my kit, it's not a kit, it's 72 hours in my basement. And I always tell people like us, presumably, you know, we have an obligation to do this, because if we don't do it, then the limited public safety capacity will be spread too thin. And honestly, we know what communities they're going to serve. They're going to serve Cambridge and Beacon Hill, right? To sort of say, so it's our obligation to this entire community that if we have the resources and the capacity to do it, we take a little bit of the pressure off. Yeah. Yes. Hi.
Your first picture reminded me that just about every single night on the news there is a plane who goes off the runway or crashes,
Yes.
or the engine falls out. Doesn't it seem like, or does it seem like there are more airplane emergencies now, and should we be fearful of flying?
Okay, I'm still
Since
flying. I was
everyone
still
else-
flying. So it's so funny you say that. I was like, yeah, isn't it great? None of them are crashing. That's my answer. We have a very complicated airplane system, airport system. I flew all through this period of the furlough. I mean, mostly because obviously the incentivizing structure is to avoid it. So we do, I mean, part of it is just an aging personnel, because we have to have a required retirement ages. You just have to. So, you know, if you're you know, my husband's a judge, like, you know, he's got like 90-year-old colleagues, right? Like, it's like no one's gonna, not like they're doing physical labor, right? So one is the personnel issue, and there are more runway excursions and close calls. And I wrote a piece for The Atlantic, was like, you know, this is the near miss that we should be paying attention to. But there was more investments before the shutdown by the FAA in it, and part of it will be we just probably have too many, too few gaps in takeoffs, sort of just to increase the time. But look, it's a relatively safe, or this is almost a perfectly safe transportation, except that we hadn't had a U.S. airline in a mid-air collision for 30 years until the national, until we lost people from Boston there. Pardon?
The skaters.
Yeah, the skaters, right, we lost, and people who were affiliated here. It had been a couple decades. And that was from all the after actions I'm reading, and I think the FAA is gonna have a report relatively soon. I mean, why the Pentagon is flying airplanes that close to commercial airlines. We have hands come really far away for a reason. So we have lessons to relearn. That was a really bad situation. Yeah. Yes.
What's at the top of your worry list?
So I mean, I do worry. So one is that Leo won't call me back, and then that's my middle one. He's my headache, as I say. But so I worry about all the things you worry about.
my kids are all in their 20s, one's in college, and the other two are already out of college. I worry about like their confidence. I mean, I'm being honest with you, just given everything that's going on, like their confidence in institutions and the need to build our institutions here. Like they look around, they're the COVID kids, they're they were economic distress or entering the job market. So part of it is, our societies function and they are safer when you have communities invested in in their resiliency. And I'm not saying my kids are like riffraff, I'm just saying I see their friends. Like if you just anyone who has 20-year-olds or anyone who's in their 20s, it's a different mindset about how they think about things. If you all be like, well, FEMA will help, and my kids look at me like, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right, maybe, So on the runway, like what makes me most nervous? Honestly, it's some combination of misinformation and AI. But not for like that fact itself, because we're even learning how to push back on it. For me, it is that it just shortened, like in particular AI, it just makes everything so fast that like, do we have time to insert human agency? It's not so much that I don't think it's gonna take over humans. That may be naive, or I don't worry about like the Tom Cruise AI robot that's gonna, it's more, it's more the pace of things. All right? I live by buying time. We live by being able to buy time, and we don't really have it with AI, so that makes me a little nervous. And how it plays out in disasters. Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I just wondered if you had heard of, and you probably have, of the jackpot theory.
No.
Okay,
Tell me.
so it's like a futuristic thing. It's essentially, rather than one big boom,
Yeah.
it's a bunch of like death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
Right, and just like things keep coming, like
Right.
popcorn.
And they all.
And in your opinion,
Yeah.
at that point, would we want more time or runway, as opposed to something else?
Yeah.
Picking your
No, and I mean, in some ways, what are you reading? Like, that's not go to 40 weeks.
We already have a date.
But I think we're already there. Like, I think that destabilization is already happening. I think we're showing resiliency in some quarters, not resiliency in other quarters. And I think we're also adapting in ways, we may not love it, but we will be adapting in ways, I think, rather dramatically. So, you look, I mentioned insurance earlier, but one of the most, I know it's so loser, but like one of the most interesting fields right now in my area is insurance. Because insurance is filling the gap where our government doesn't, which is it's basically saying you shouldn't live here. Because like when people say I can't get insurance, it's actually often not true. It's like I don't want to pay this price for insurance, right? It's like I can get insurance for most everything, and so I just don't want to pay that much. And I think what you're starting to see is insurance, because of your worry of this, starting to try to solve this a little bit and require behavior on your part. You can't live here. We're not going to reimburse you there. But yeah, no, I mean, I sort of feel like it's that way already, that these disruptions are fast and their impacts are wider. And it's just, and that's why I said, like, if you're ready, then your floor doesn't fall. Like so that's like, what's less bad is the difference between here, I'm already at the floor, it's between here and here. That's my less bad standard. And I can have numbers for it.
I guess the question I'm asking is, if the cadence increases, how do you?
You just keep trying to buy more time. I mean, honestly.
Just keep trying to buy more time.
I mean, look, I would love to have a world in which that's not true.
Yep.
And there are lots of fabulous people on what we call the left side of the room who are, they're trying to mitigate climate change. They're trying to adapt to X. They're putting, locks on the cockpit doors. They're disrupting terrorist groups. All that stuff. They're studying viruses to make sure that those of us who want vaccines can get them, right? Like a vaccine is left to boom. Vaccine is absolutely left to boom. It's gonna turn, but and I want them to work, but I couldn't. If I'm looking at like where am I putting investments? If I put 100
pennies of my dollar bill on left side of the boom, I'm doing a disservice, right? So, so we think about like, okay, how would you want to distribute that money at this stage, right? How would you want to distribute your 100 pennies?
Little here, little there.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
but like honestly, like with nuclear, I want to do 80-20, right? With climate, I honestly want to do 20-80 right
So
now.
run toward the left.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, it's doing the boom. It's doing the boom. It is, yeah. Okay, yes.
Light and shallow. I love that, and this is so interesting, but I love that you bring up Harry and Meghan. Are they? all I
Don't
want
get me
is a
started.
Bravo question.
Okay.
All
Oh
I
wait, they're
know-
doing Bravo. Did you guys hear?
Oh, what?
Because I have a house in Jamestown, Rhode Island.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Real Housewives of Rhode Island. That was my warrant. But I'm looking forward to it. I watch a lot of TV. So how do I remain happy? I watch a lot of TV.
Your brain needs the relief. So
Yes.
Are they staying together? Yes or no?
No way.
Yes.
He's going back. My husband is also into this, and he was like, my husband said, he has no idea what's about to happen. Yes, so sorry, that's my theory.
Well, just because it's a boom.
Yeah.
He's listening, like he's listening.
Yes.
It's like hearing his family.
Yes. What am I gonna say? Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting, no one's ever asked, okay, so, yeah, I'll tell you how it works. So Liberty Media is a very large holding company. They own Sirius, she asked me like, what do I actually do this weekend? So they own Sirius, they own, pointedly Live Nation. So I'll tell you how I got from them. So Live Nation a couple years ago, many of you will remember, had a crowd crush at an open rap concert, open air.
My husband is the president of Access Casualty.
Yeah.
He just wrote this insurance.
Yeah, so,
Like 2 weeks ago for
Live Nation, yeah, so
Yeah,
you
he just wrote
don't,
it.
yeah, so you don't, I love insurance, so like you don't, like, it's very hard to, I mean, crowd crushes to, like, I get mad at a lot of things. I get really mad at crowd crushes because it's like one of the most avoidable
But they
things.
didn't even know that the crowd crush was happening
Yeah.
while we were on stage.
Well, yeah, well, I don't know that, that's not, yeah, that's not, there were, or think about South Korea and what happened to over 100 kids when they died on that Halloween crowd crush. Like there's enough signals if you're looking for them to be able to stop a crowd crush. It's one of the most easily avoidable things. So I say that only because what happens is, the company says, oh my God, we have a lot of high profile events. And I call myself an interpreter, maybe for CNN too, or for insurance or whatever, which is you have these very distinct languages in the field, and then you have the people who own Formula One teams, or you have like people who are doing other things. And I sort of translate both. So, okay, so I come in through Liberty Media, it's my 3rd year. For the first year, it was a headache, much greater headache because they closed the strip, so it was new and we were trying to figure things out. So I basically do due diligence for legal and C-suite over the security plan, but not in a bad way. Like I work with the security teams, troubleshoot, set up their comms plans, do rigorous. So tomorrow I ride late at night. The first closing of the strip is Thursday. I will spend Thursday on the strip, and then I will spend, and I know public safety, it's very complicated. You have Las Vegas, the state, FIA, which is the people who control the track. You have Formula One, which is the entity that controls like the race, but the track is different than the race. You have Las Vegas, you have federal assets. So it's a complicated thing. But for this race, I will spend it in what's called the emergency, what we call EWOC, which is the Operations Center. So it's Event Week Operations Center. So everyone's like, oh, you guys go to Formula One. I have a no drinking clause in my contracts because I'm not allowed to have fun. And my working hours, because it's a nighttime race, are at the age of 56, are 6 p.m.
to 4 a.m. till they, it's a hard race, but I love it because it is Las Vegas. Like if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it in Las Vegas. And I will be in the room, so if something happened, you're not just having operators, like the lawyers, the C-suite will have someone who's, I don't deploy resources anymore. I'm not like, we need 8 ambulances there. That I have confidence in someone that I'm the one who's that, you have 8 ambulances on it, we need to do X on the racetrack. We need to do X, Y, and Z. So that's basically, so that would be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that came from Live Nation. That came because of a recognition that there was no transparency of the safety teams. And that's where you know who I sit next to in this room? The insurance and the lawyer.
So the Live Nation one, from what David told me about, is that the band actually didn't know.
Yeah. The public safety did know, and that's the terrifying thing. And little side thing, like I'm sure you're. There was a deference to the talent that was super crazy. Like, because apparently he,
Right, that's.
he liked the pump and all that stuff. But as a public safety person, you've got to tell the VIP, you can't do this, right? Because we have kids who are. So yeah, that's exactly right. They didn't know. He didn't. No, I don't think he. In fact, he's not part of the litigation. It's really interesting. He didn't know.
He didn't
Yeah,
know.
you didn't know?
He didn't know.
Yes, I'll do 2 more. Go ahead. Yes.
I had a question about FEMA. It was in the news today.
Yes.
The head of FEMA resigned.
Yeah, the
and
acting
Trump
head,
appointee that really didn't respond to the California flooding. And it said a woman, the second in command, is going to take over. Do you know anything about
I
that?
don't. It's a great question. So basically, the president, it's really interesting. So the president came in saying he wanted to abolish FEMA. Guess who saved FEMA besides the Texas flood? Republican governors. So like when you think about like influence, and that's what I teach my students, like influence in an age when things are very, like, who are your allies? Republican governors in Oklahoma, in Texas, in Florida, know that FEMA doesn't just provide support, it provides a check. Now, we are waiting for the president has a FEMA review board that's actually, it's quite legitimate. I testified before it. It is assessing, I think, some things that, like, Trump is very smart in that he picks up on a complaint about something. I don't like where he often takes it, but in terms of his sort of disruption of, as I said, like, we've been built this way, right? So this is literally how FEMA worked. Bad thing happens. Hi, can we write you a check? So sorry. And Trump is promoting, as every Democratic and Republican head of FEMA has for the last 7 of them, is a system that goes, you know what, we're gonna put conditions on that money. I'm for it. You're gonna hear about condition-based relief money. I'm all for it, because it's exactly like what insurance is doing, which is, this is madness that we're doing this. So it'll be interesting to see. I have more optimism about, there will be a change about that group, and FEMA will, I think, she's career, so I think we're in good hands. He was here.
Looking at the Texas flood, what's your sort of negligence versus active thought on I can't miss it?
Totally avoidable deaths in most instances. I mean, what is their decisions have been made. So this is another thing where, why are we paying for flood insurance for areas that are not investing that money in sirens, right? So part of it was the politics, and I blame people who didn't, the Biden administration had offered the community the sirens in the big beautiful bill, and like, I don't know what happened, but like, it was like one of those jurisdictions that did not take it. So I just want to give you a sense, like my time thing, my runway. So you could say act of God, true. But I study deaths because I want to know, why did this person die and not that person, right? We call it listen to the dead, is sort of the philosophical way. One of the chapters is called Listen to the Dead, which is why you and me sitting next to each other or sleeping 4 feet apart. Why did I survive and you didn't? Sometimes it's an act of God, sometimes it's luck. And now that we're looking back on what happened with Texas, it was one cabin, and the girls were 4-minute walk to safety. And that's why everyone else survived. And that was sort of a combination of sort of good luck or whatever. But But had there been a siren and had a bunch of other things not happen, they sort of had a negligent emergency manager, those girls could have easily survived. There was plenty of time. So when I think about my runways, like, all they needed was 4 minutes, all those girls needed was 4 minutes. And how, we need to invest in systems that do, because we can learn, right? So, like, one of the things, like, remember the tsunami, 15 years ago now, killed 250,000 people in the Indian Ocean, or the countries in the Indian Ocean, another 150,000 for health-related, post-tsunami health-related reasons. So you think, right, so you study the dead, so you think, okay, everyone close to the shore died, and anyone away from the shore didn't die. It didn't work that way.
The New York Times just reported all the new data.
Yes.
And the girls in those, the counselors were particularly compliant and
Yeah.
had been instructed not
Yeah.
to leave.
That's exactly right. So they weren't willing
And
to.
others were like,
Screw you, right, exactly. And what happened with the tsunami in Indonesia is, like, you think, okay, these, this is an act of God. If you were near, too bad for those people near the water. And well, a tsunami gives you time, right? Now, before the tsunami, like you, I'm sure, like, I don't know what I would have thought if water was receding. It really took the great tsunami in 2005, I think, 2004, or maybe it was later, sorry. Now I'm getting my dates mixed up, doesn't matter. For all of us to know that when the water recedes, you're supposed to run for the hills. And if you look at the death studies on that, it actually turned out that people who were close to the shore often survived. And the differential was if you were from an older village where the lessons of the previous tsunami were passed on. And the lesson was beware of the seventh. The lesson literally was beware of the seventh wave. It's the seventh wave that tends to take out communities. So it was like, yeah, those communities learned through informal means of narrative that if the water recedes, run for the hills. If you look at the death count along the shoreline, guess who passed away? Europeans who were staying at hotels because they saw the water recede and they didn't know what to do. So now in Indonesia, Philippines, all of them, when the water recedes, that's when you have those big alert systems because you have time. All I need, think about an earthquake. All I need is my people. They are telling me I have a flight tomorrow, but I'll be at the library if any of you are around. But thank you so much.